Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
San Diego County leaders say the newly established Migrant Welcome Center is a model for the whole country. The problem? It's almost out of money. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. The county allocated $3 million for the center last month. Between 500 and 700 migrants pass through it every single day. But KPBS reporter Gustavo Solis says the center will run out of funding by the end of the year.
Welcome to San Diego.
Bienvenidos a San Diego.
That's a volunteer welcoming dozens of migrants from all over the world to San Diego. County Supervisor Nora Vargas provides the Spanish translation. The center provides a wide range of services. Phone chargers so people can talk to relatives and make travel arrangements, transportation to the airport, and food. The kitchen serves 600 meals each day. For some migrants, it's the first hot meal they've had in days.
I think this should be the model for the United States, right? I mean, I think we are really doing what everybody else should be doing.
In Texas? They would die to have this. They would love to have this, honestly.
The county awarded the $3 million to SBCS, formerly known as South Bay Community Services, to operate the center. Nonprofits like Haitian Bridge Alliance, Al Otro Lado, and Immigrant Defenders Law Center also provide services at the center, but at their own expense. Those organizations don't receive a portion of the county money. Vargas says it costs $1.5 million a month to keep the center running. At this rate, she expects to run out of funding by the middle of December.
I'm afraid that if we don't have a location like this, we're going to go back to a place where people are dropped in different locations throughout the county, and that is just not safe for them.
She's asking the federal government to step up with more funding. Congressman Juan Vargas points out that the $3 million originally came from the federal government. It's part of the COVID-era American Rescue Plan. And that's on top of tens of millions of dollars in other federal aid for migrants throughout the country. Still, he acknowledges that the federal government needs to do more.
Well, to be frank, I mean, the federal government spent $60 million on this program. So we've spent a lot of money. Not enough.
Vargas says migrants should be seen as a resource, not a burden.
It's a blessing to get people that are young and want to work. I mean, our labor participation rate in this country has dropped dramatically. And unless we have more children, or unless there's immigrants that come in here, our economy long-term is going to suffer dramatically.
Yet, he also acknowledges that the deep political divide in Congress means immigration reform is unlikely to happen anytime soon. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
Communities across San Diego County have long fought against sexually violent predators being placed in their neighborhoods. Now, as KPBS reporter Jacob Ayer tells us, a local lawmaker is introducing legislation to address those concerns.
Congressman Darrell Issa's announcement Friday of the Stopping Sexually Violent Predators Act had plenty of community support. He says the new legislation would end federal taxpayer funding for SVPs unless they're housed and supervised at correctional or secure medical facilities.
You're going to have to put people into clinical, observed situations that are safe to the community, because these individuals are not safe to the community. To be a sexually violent predator designation, you have to be clinically found to be incurable.
His legislation would also require states to report convicted SVPs to the Federal Department of Justice for a review of charges. Rancho Bernardo resident Channing Alsacer supports the policy. She says her family has personally been affected by the issue and had to fight to keep an SVP away from their home.
We were a part of fighting against Douglas Badger back in 2021 that started.
Badger served 5 separate prison terms for crimes that include child molestation and kidnapping. After neighbors in both Mount Helix and Rancho Bernardo protested about his proposed placement, the state approved his release to Borrego Springs this March, despite similar community pushback.
That was really scary and daunting to think that somebody of that caliber would be just 2 doors down. I mean, our backyards almost meet up to each other.
Issa says SVPs tend to be placed in more rural communities, like those in his district, which covers the central and eastern parts of San Diego County and a portion of Riverside County. He says more than a dozen SVPs have been released from custody and designated to reside in both counties, the majority of which are in his district.
Sexually violent predators are the most likely to commit crimes again and again and again. Many of them have been incarcerated 2, 3, 4 times.
Issa says without new policies in place, the problem will continue to grow. Jacob Ayer, KPBS News.
San Diego International Airport's Terminal 1 expansion is underway, along with changes to the surrounding road network. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says that's causing a stir in Little Italy.
The cars, when they hit all the green lights, they're hauling to get to the freeway.
It's a noisy morning in Little Italy as traffic zooms by on Grape Street. I'm here with Luke Vinci, a board member of the Little Italy Association. Grape is one of the main routes from the growing San Diego International Airport to Interstate 5. The city and airport have plans to redesign it and increase the number of lanes from 3 to 4.
They'll remove all the parking, which is going to affect the businesses and the residents that live along here. It's going to create a more of a sound divide between the two parts of the neighborhood.
The Little Italy Association voted this week to oppose the street's redesign. The airport says it'll reduce congestion, but a traffic study found the change would decrease delays at one intersection by 29 seconds max. And delays will increase at other intersections by up to a minute. And then there's the safety problem. Crossing Grape as a pedestrian is dangerous. City data shows 72 crashes have happened on the street since 2015, injuring 54 people. Speeding and unsafe turns are the most frequent causes.
I think the city should prioritize the safety of vulnerable road users, number one.
Chloe Lauer is executive director of the San Diego County Bicycle Coalition. She likes the city and airport's plans to add a bike lane on Grape Street, but she'd prefer it have stronger protection from traffic. And she says, don't invite more traffic and speeding with a 4th lane for cars.
That would turn it into basically like an arterial inside of a very dense, walkable commercial zone. We don't need highways in our communities.
The airport did consider traffic calming measures on Grape Street as a way to mitigate for the increased noise caused by the 4th lane. But it ultimately decided trying to slow down cars here is, quote, infeasible. The airport says it's doing the project at the city's request. It's due to be installed in late summer 2025. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
We have had some chilly nights out there lately, and we'll be a little cool again late tonight. Temperatures in Oceanside down to 35, 44 in San Diego. Heading into the interior, 34 Mount Laguna, but 44 to Borrego Springs, and El Cajon will be around 44 late tonight. Well, we have a lot of eyes on late next week, and when we get into our full weather cast, we'll talk about this system digging south, and which will bring the opportunity for some rain later next week. Details ahead.
A case before the U.S. Supreme Court could upend the city of San Diego's robust program for removing guns from people who pose a threat. KPBS reporter Scott Rod has this story.
San Diego's gun violence restraining order program has removed over 1,000 firearms in the last 5 years.
We could get a call at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and have a gun violence restraining order in place within an hour or two.
City Attorney Mara Elliott spearheaded the program.
It has been a terrific crisis intervention tool, whether it's intimate partner violence, which is about a third of the cases that we see, about 36%. We also see a lot of threatened suicides. And then you get the other categories, potential workplace violence or school violence, neighbors that are getting on each other's nerves, acquaintances, that kind of thing.
The case before the Supreme Court involves a Texas man who lost his right to own a gun after facing a domestic abuse restraining order. Elliott says a decision in favor of the Texas defendant would undermine San Diego's program.
So if the court determines that that person still has a right to guns, I don't see why we would have gun violence restraining orders, because that's the whole point, is to step into a volatile situation and remove the gun from that person.
But she says she's cautiously optimistic based on arguments heard earlier this week. The High Court is expected to issue its ruling by June of next year. Scott Rodd, KPBS News.
Congress is in recess for Veterans Day, but a day out of the office isn't necessarily a day off of work, as members have just 1 week to pass legislation to fund the U.S. government and avoid a shutdown. If this story feels familiar to you, it's because legislators were in the same position just over a month ago. Gloria Pasmino breaks it down.
Well, at the very least, this all seems to suggest that the honeymoon for Speaker Johnson is very much over. The last time they made a funding agreement, they only funded the government for 45 days. So the deadline is coming up once again. And the question is, are they going to finally make a deal, or will they continue to kick this budget can down the road?
It feels like Groundhog Day in Washington.
In just a few days, the federal government is once again at risk of shutting down,
as Congress remains at an impasse over passing a budget.
The objective is to find compromise and advance the ball forward. In the immediate, we need to pass a CR to keep the government funded and open.
The stopgap bill, known as a continuing resolution, or CR, passed at the end of September with bipartisan support, extending funding through November 17. But the compromise came at the expense of then-Speaker Kevin McCarthy's leadership position, as far-right members of his Republican caucus revolted.
I've moved to vacate the chair.
In the first big test of his leadership, House Speaker Mike Johnson is tasked with navigating the same quagmire McCarthy faced, getting his fractured Republican caucus to coalesce around legislation that will also pass the democratically controlled Senate.
If he does decide to pass a continuing resolution, that's going to upset enough members, given his small majority, that his speakership will be questioned.
But even if Congress avoids a shutdown this time, some fear the continued dysfunction in Washington puts the country at risk.
Whether it be over the debt limit or electing a speaker to the House or government shutdown, one of these times, we're just not going to be able to pull it together. And we're going to do a lot of damage to, our economy, to our markets, to our standing in the world.
So all eyes are on Speaker Johnson and whether or not he will take the advice of some veteran lawmakers who want to pass another stopgap bill and get the government funded at least through January, or will he cave to the right-wing faction of his party, including several lawmakers who very much want to have that fiscal fight. I'm Gloria Pasmino in New York. Back to you.
Changes to federal taxes next year could help most Americans hold on to more of their income. The IRS boosted the income thresholds for each tax bracket, accounting for inflation. It will apply to returns filed in 2025. However, the standard deduction will increase for both married couples filing jointly and single filers.
I'm Jeff Bennett. Tonight on the NewsHour, dozens of journalists have been killed in the Israel-Hamas war. How their deaths affect what we know about the conflict. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
More than 3 million veterans experienced a mental illness in 2021, according to a national survey, and the data shows nearly half of them didn't seek treatment. Today, as we observe Veterans Day, health experts say you can honor those who have served by supporting them. Mandy Gaither has more.
In and out of the uniform, U.S. military servicemen and women can face unique mental health struggles, and many veterans don't get the help they need, says clinical psychologist Craig Bryant with Ohio State's Wexner Medical Center.
They kind of feel, I can do this on my own. I don't want anybody to help me, and I don't want to bother other people.
Having a support system can help, Brian says, to reach out to veterans you know, checking in on a regular basis, invite them to engage in social activities, exercise with them, or do a hobby together.
All of these things increase their sense of connection and has also been shown to elevate positive mood and psychological well-being.
Brian says to also watch out for red flags. There could be a mental health concern if a veteran experiences severe behavior changes, sleep disruption like an inability to fall and stay asleep, or if there are concerning verbalizations like, I can't take this anymore.
We often find that veterans will not necessarily say out loud that they're having thoughts about suicide. They may have these other sort of coded statements that would indicate that things aren't going really well.
Brian says it's also important to let veterans know there is help for them.
our advances in psychological treatments have been very profound over the past few decades, and that many of those conditions that we were talking about before that often affect veterans, there are actually now really good treatments that are remarkably successful for addressing those issues.
For Health Minute, I'm Andy Gaither.
It's the final showdown for two women's soccer greats this weekend at Snapdragon Stadium. OL Reigns, Megan Rapinoe, and Gotham FC's Ali Krieger face off against each other for the final game of their careers as their teams play for the championship title here in San Diego. KPBS reporter Alexander Nguyen has the preview.
As evidenced at practice, both Megan Rapinoe and her teammates know this will be the two-time World Cup winner's last game of her career before retirement. It's also the OL Reigns' third attempt at the championship title.
This will be a memory that we have for a lifetime no matter what happens.
Rapinoe says the team has been keeping things as routine as possible this week to prepare for the game on Saturday.
I think everyone's really embraced it, and really, understood and kind of let sink in how special and how cool this is to be here. It's really unique that you get to a championship game ever in your career.
The Reign has been here before. They played in the championship game in 2014 and 2015 as Seattle Reign FC. The mood at training today has been a celebration of the championship game and of two extraordinary careers.
We're going to celebrate this last training. We're going to celebrate Ali's last training.
In addition to Rapinoe, this will also be Ali Krieger's last game before retirement. She was part of the league's founding and played in the inaugural season. She says her proudest achievement is leaving the sport better than when she started.
Especially from, in 2012 when we first started, or 13. And to see where it is now and to see what we have and to come here and feel important and feel like this final is what we deserve.
Rapinoe and Krieger were on the U.S. women's national team together and have developed a camaraderie. That camaraderie extends to the championship, even though they are on opposite teams.
So I feel like this moment we're just happy to be in together. I think we both of each other wish each other so well. We're so happy and proud of each other.
And no matter what happens, Rapinoe says they will end their career on a high. The Reign and Gotham face off at 5 p.m. Saturday at Snapdragon Stadium. Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
Starting next season, America will be seeing a lot more of the NWSL. SDSU's Miro Kopik tells us why the new broadcast deal is a game changer in the Friday Business Report.
This is a transformative deal, $240 million four-year package worth $60 million a year. To put it in perspective, it is 40 times larger than the previous media deal, which is about $1.5 million a year. And this involves all the major sports networks, including CBS Sports, ESPN, Prime Video, and then Scripps Sports. This is a really inflection point for women's sports. We've seen the development of leagues around the world where, in the UK, for example, that really do a lot in terms of professional women development. This deal, it allows the leagues to change the minimum and maximum salary levels because a lot of American women play overseas because they can actually get paid more than they do here. Secondly, it allows us to bring in superstars that are not American. It provides for better player development. And so it really is a big win for the National Women's Soccer League.
Well, we have a lot of big stories in the Western Horizon, or on the Western Horizon later next week regarding the potential for some very welcome rain, also some wind and a lot of clouds. But in the short term, we have kind of quiet weather to begin our forecast. We have lighter winds. The Santa Ana wind event that we recently had is ending, and it has ended for us. So thankfully, lighter winds for the weekend. We're going to have sunny afternoons and just a subtle warming trend into the weekend. Not a big temperature change. The bigger story comes in mid to late next week here with potential for rain as a big area of low pressure dips in, big trough off the west coast, and that's going to begin to shift some moisture in our direction. Tonight, though, 44 in the city, patchy clouds. Some of you are going to be a little colder, just a little bit away from the coastline. So as we get into the daytime weather on Saturday, it looks like a beautiful Veterans Day. And as we take a look at those highs, 84 in El Cajon, 85 into Escondido, but around 77 for your high in the city. Farther east, you can see the variety there. Mount Laguna, the cool 50s too, with some elevation under your feet, but Borrego Springs will be around 79 for the high. As we step deeper into the forecast, again, things get a lot more active. We're dealing with this big, deep trough that'll become more amplified later next week, and there's potential for some significant rain and also some heavy mountain snow up into the Sierra. This will also curtail the fire season. It has thankfully been a much below average fire season in the United States this year, with about 2.5 million acres burnt, but typically between 6 and 7 million acres by now on a national level. Now, with that said, it was awful up in Canada, and also we had our 5th deadliest wildfire in our nation's history in Hawaii, and it was the deadliest in over a century. That was a couple of months ago. So again, it hasn't all been good news, but at least the acreage burnt in the U.S. was far below average, lowest since the late 1990s. As we take a look at this future radar, though, big dip in the jet stream digging south, and look at the moisture. Initially, this is offshore, but there is hope and the likelihood that this will send at least some rain in our direction later in the week, and we'll be tracking that very closely. So the coastal forecast, you can see we're going to be warming up slightly into Sunday, 79, then a bit of a cool down with decent weather, and then the clouds increase ahead of that system. Inland areas warming up to 85, then cooling down a bit into the mid-70s into Wednesday. The mountains staying in the 50s here, low 50s, trending down slightly into midweek. And the deserts, we'll see a little more cloud cover into the Thursday time frame as well. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Jeff Cornish.
From the northern border with Oregon to right here in San Diego County, the first ever California Festival is in full swing across the Golden State. The festival features classical music with a focus on new composers. KPBS reporter John Carroll gives us a look and listen to the San Diego Symphony's preview performance of the festival, a performance that did not take place in California.
Fresh off a national tour that ended with a performance in Carnegie Hall last month, the San Diego Symphony was on the road again last week, out of the United States, but close to home.
To come here is, I think, important as we look for cultural bonds and connections.
Here is Tijuana, the Seacoot, Tijuana's cultural center. The symphony presenting a free concert for our southern neighbors. At a pre-concert news conference, Martha Gilmer and the Consul General of Mexico in San Diego, Carlos Gonzalez Gutierrez, spoke of the transcendent meaning of this cultural event.
Their work has to benefit everybody and has to reach every member of this single region, that although it's composed by 2 nations, it's in the end one sole region.
The need for understanding and compassion and communication in our world is more important than ever, and music can help us do that.
Back to the main purpose of the California Festival, showcasing works that are 5 years old or less, like David Chesky's The Abreu Danza, No. 4.
San Diego Symphony Orchestra, the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra are the anchors for the California Festival, which is a 3-week period of time. And we've invited many, many musical organizations around the state, 100 as a matter of fact, to perform new music, to showcase new composers.
But not just new composers. Some of a previous era who broke the norms of their day were included, like Richard Strauss and his famous Also sprach Zarathustra. piece requires the full 90-member orchestra, and that includes an organ. As you might imagine, moving the full orchestra here, including 2 harps, a marimba, and of course the organ, was quite the logistical challenge, a job which primarily fell to the symphony's Vice President of Impact and Innovation, Laura Reynolds.
Well, it's a complicated jigsaw puzzle of packing that our incredible production team put together. So yes, it has taken months of planning to figure out how many musicians, how many instruments, how we're going to get it across the border in both directions.
The Seacoop Theater seats about 1,000 people, and it was full. I'm told hundreds were turned away. If the dos damas on either side of the stage could talk, they'd probably agree with the audience. This visit, this performance was on so many levels a rousing success. This concert was an auspicious occasion. It's the first time the symphony has played in Tijuana for more than 20 years. And it happened on an auspicious day, Dia de los Muertos, also the 200th anniversary of the establishment of relations between the United States and Mexico. A day, as Symphony CEO Martha Gilmer said, to heal the wounds of our souls through friendship and music. In Tijuana, John Carroll, KPBS News.
And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. By viewers like you. Thank you.